Millionaire marries black homeless woman and shocks family after bride disappears. The whole town couldn't believe their eyes or their ears. Edward Smith, the local billionaire, was about to marry Bella, a woman no one expected to see anywhere near his world. Bella, once a face on the streets, rumored to be homeless, showing up in his mansion draped in designer clothes like a princess from a fairy tale, nobody wanted to admit was real. And just days before the wedding, she vanished, gone, like she'd melted into thin air. No note, no warning, just nothing. The whispering started immediately. What did she find out? Did she really ever belong here? Was it all some huge mistake? Eyes followed Edward everywhere, sharp and unforgiving, hungry for answers he couldn't give. His family was furious, scandalized, wealthy, respected. They had hopes pinned on that alliance, the kind that would silence the gossip forever. But Bella's sudden disappearance tore that hope apart like cheap fabric. Edward's world spun out of control. A nightmare wrapped in gold drapes and marble floors that somehow felt colder than the chill outside. His chest tightened every time he heard a rumor or saw a glare. His hands trembled whenever he checked his phone, hoping for a sign, a message, anything. But silence echoed back. Then came the shocker no one expected. Just 2 days before the wedding, now canceled, Edward announced he would marry Maria Johnson. Maria, the caretaker's daughter. A quiet girl from the other side of town. Someone no one there really looked twice at. She had worked in the shadows of the mansion for years, unseen and steady. But now she was stepping into the blinding glare of the spotlight. The same spotlight that had made Bella vanish. The town buzzed with questions. Why Maria? Why now? The headlines ran wild. Millionaire marries caretaker's daughter to save face. The mansion, with its sprawling gardens and icy chandeliers, suddenly became a stage for a drama that no one could predict. Maria's pale skin, soft eyes shadowed by illness, her faint smile barely hiding the weight she carried inside. But beneath the polished surface, beneath Edward's forced calm, something real struggled to breathe. The mansion, once a symbol of rigid wealth and cold power, now felt tight, suffocating with urgency. The respectability they both fought to maintain was a cage lined with whispers and side glances. Maria's heartbeat, fragile and uncertain, pulsed quietly beneath her gown as the day closed in. On wedding morning, the air was thick, electric, trembling. The guests arrived, faces stiff, eyes sharp. Then, just as the ceremony began, Maria swayed, her body folding like a fragile bloom, snapping under a harsh wind. Gasps flooded the room. Edward caught her just before she hit the floor, his arms shaking as if the whole world balanced on that moment. The faint color in her cheeks drained instantly, replaced by a terrifying ghost of weakness. Chaos followed, doctors rushing, murmurs growing into rumors, fear drilling into Edward's heart like freezing needles. Would this strange arrangement born from urgency and desperation, survive the first test? Was Maria's secret but could love really take root in such broken, uneven soil? Outside, the mansion's gates creaked under the weight of curiosity and judgment. Inside, the fragile bond between two people from wildly different worlds began to crack and bend, maybe to break. The clock ticked louder, the shadows lengthened, and Edward's mind raced. What had he gotten himself into? And what dark truths hid behind Maria's quiet, pale smile? Was this the beginning of something real, or the end of everything? Before we continue with this amazing story, I need to give you an important warning. Many subscribers have reported that YouTube has removed their subscriptions without warning. Just take a quick look at the red button below to make sure you're still subscribed to the channel. I don't want you to miss out on any exclusive content coming your way. And while you're there, leave that powerful like that. Helps me a lot with the algorithm. Oh, and tell me in the comments, which city are you watching from? I love getting to know all the amazing people who are part of this community. Your participation makes all the difference. Let's interact. As Edward knelt to catch Maria, panic surged through the room like a tidal wave. Guests scrambled, chairs screeched, and whispers turned into gasps, a symphony of chaos choking the air. He could feel her lifeless weight in his arms, her fragile body falling like a whisper into the storm around them. The wedding, once filled with hope, shattered like glass, scattering anxiety in all directions. "Get a doctor," someone shouted, the urgency slicing through the confusion. Edward's heart thundered against his chest as he laid Maria gently on the polished floor, her face a ghostly white against the dark wood. He pressed his hands to her temples, searching for warmth, but feeling the coolness seeping from her skin. Just then, an explosion of sound erupted from the crowd. The door burst open, revealing a figure cloaked in shadows. It was Bella, the bride who had vanished, her presence a shockwave that stalled time. She stood there, wide-eyed and breathless, like a deer tracked in headlights. Gasps rippled through the room, disbelief stamped on every face. "What's she doing here?" someone muttered. The curl of scandal returned, sharper than before. Edward turned, his heart pounding anew. Why was she back? He opened his mouth to speak, but the words tangled in his throat. Bella strode forward, her eyes darting between Edward and Maria, concern cutting through the chaos. "What's happening? Is she okay?" But as Bella bent down, examining Maria's frail form, it was what she said next that twisted the knife of disbelief further. "She didn't collapse from nerves. She's pregnant." Silence fell, heavy and suffocating. The weight of the revelation was a crushing beast, pressing down on everyone, stealing breath and thoughts. Edward staggered back, disbelief flooding his senses. Maria? Pregnant? His mind raced. Fragments of their shared moments, including secret glances and hesitant smiles, suddenly twisted into a backdrop of uncertainty. Where is this coming from? Edward's voice trembled, thick with confusion, his eyes darting between the two women. Even the guests, who had been ready to judge, stood frozen, mouths agape. "To protect her," Bella explained, her voice low but steady. "Maria has been scared, and we thought—" Maria stirred, her eyes flickering open, and panic reignited in Edward's chest. He leaned closer, the world crumbling beyond the immediate need to keep her safe. "Maria, can you hear me?" But the sparks of shock were just beginning. As Edward's voice reached her, a soft smile broke through Maria's pain. "Edward, you need to listen." Her voice was barely a whisper, and he leaned closer still, feeling the rush of adrenaline surge through him. "I can't keep hiding. It's not just about us anymore." Her hand trembled as she reached up to touch his face. "They're not just my secrets. They're ours." Before Edward could process her words, a sound like heavy thunder rolled through the mansion. A shockwave rattled the walls, a blast so fierce it knocked pictures askew. Cries echoed, a piercing alarm, as the ground seemed to shake beneath them. Then the lights flickered ominously, plunging the room into a half-light. Shadows dancing wildly across the walls. Edward shook his head, caught in disbelief. The wedding, the mysterious women, the town's judgment, it all felt like a web tightening around him. He needed answers, but the chaos around him was spinning faster, pulling him down an unfamiliar path. Was this the unraveling of everything he knew? The clock was ticking, the stakes rising higher than ever. What dark truths would now come crashing in like the storm brewing outside? The chaos hung thick in the air as Edward knelt beside Maria, panic rising within him like an uncontrollable fire. The guests shifted uneasily, their faces pale, hearts pounding with uncertainty. Bella's return felt surreal, her presence igniting more questions than answers. Edward's mind raced, barely processing her revelation about Maria's pregnancy, when another Then everything shattered. The floors trembled beneath them as a loud crash reverberated through the house. A wall burst open, dust and debris erupting like a violent storm. Time slowed, suspended in that moment. All eyes shifted, horror-struck as a tall figure stepped through the wreckage. It was a man, menacing and wild-eyed, dark hair falling over his face, bearing a resemblance to Edward that sent shockwaves through the crowd. The tension snapped, replaced by a sharp, gasping silence. "Edward!" The intruder's voice was a low growl, filled with desperation and rage. "You have to listen to me, now!" Edward flinched, recognition hitting him hard. This was Jacob, his estranged brother, a shadow from his past, long buried under layers of family ties and expectations. Jacob had taken a darker path, slipping through the cracks of their privileged life. The town had whispered rumors about him. Addiction, violence, betrayal. But now he stood before Edward, a stark reminder of a legacy he had tried to escape. "Get out!" Edward shouted, his heart pounding. However, the urgency in Jacob's eyes forced him to stay silent for a moment longer. "Maria is not who you think she is." Jacob's words sliced through the chaos, sharper than glass. "She's connected to everything. You don't know the truth." Maria stirred below Edward, her eyes opening wide in alarm. "What? What do you mean?" There was fear in her voice, raw and shaking. With a sudden surge of energy, Jacob stepped closer, drawing everyone's attention. "She's not just a caretaker's daughter. She's involved in something bigger than you can imagine. Something dangerous. They're after your family, and she's been a part of it." Gasps erupted, shockwaves rippling through the crowd. Edward felt his breath hitch, shock clamping down on his chest. What did Jacob mean? Hadn't Maria just been hiding in plain sight, carrying her own burdens? His thoughts raced back to Bella and the secrets she had hinted at. Had he been blind this whole time? Before he could respond, another crash reverberated, more violent this time. The lights flickered, plunging the room into flickering darkness for fleeting seconds. When they returned, the atmosphere crackled with fear. Gasps turned to murmurs, whispers shooting through the guests like daggers. What was this twisted game unfolding before them? Edward couldn't think straight, mind spinning. Jacob was dangerous. Bella was back, and Maria was linked to a threat against his family. He felt the heaviness of reality crashing upon him, blurring the lines between trust and betrayal. "Please, I'm begging you," Jacob implored, tears welling as he gazed pleadingly at Edward. "You need to know what's at stake." As uncertainty brewed around them, the weight of every moment pressed down. Suddenly, Maria whispered, her voice trembling, "What do we need to do?" The mansion felt alive with tension, shadows creeping closer, hearts racing. In that moment, every eye was glued to them, fear intertwining with curiosity. Edward could feel it, the stakes rising higher than he ever anticipated, a storm gathering within and around them. What dark truth was unraveling? And in those flickering lights, who could they trust anymore? The answers hung heavy in the air, elusive and shimmering just beyond reach, begging him to uncover the secrets that might shatter everything he thought he knew. As the chaos enveloped them, Edward felt a strange heaviness in the air, as if the entire mansion held its breath. Jacob's words echoed. "She's connected to everything." But what did that even mean? Maria's gaze darted between him and Jacob, confusion etched in her pale features. Her voice was a fragile whisper. "What's happening?" Before Edward could answer, another crash rang out, sending a fresh wave of panic crashing through the guests. With the ground still trembling beneath them, a glint of metal caught Edward's eye, drawing his unease deeper. The sound of heavy footsteps approached from the darkened hallway. A tall figure emerged, silhouetted against the flickering lights. Edward felt a chill creep through him. With every step, clarity swirled around them. Then the figure stepped into the light, and the room fell into stunned silence. It was their father, wealthy, powerful, and completely composed. But this was the man Edward had thought was 10 miles away, busy with business deals. A man whose influence had always overshadowed their lives. He should have been the last person here. What are you doing here?" Edward managed, his heart racing. But instead of answering, his father locked eyes with Maria, a look of cold familiarity passing between them. "You shouldn't have underestimated your family, Maria. Did you think you could escape?" The room gasped. Edward felt the ground shift beneath him, disbelieving shock tightening his chest. "What do you mean?" he shouted, his voice rising in desperation. "Maria has been working for me, gathering information, feeding me details about the people we need to watch," his father said, each word heavy with disdain. "She's been a spy, Edward, a traitor." Andrea gasped, hands flying to cover her mouth. The whispers of confusion morphed into a torrent of accusations, filling the air like thick smoke. Edward felt the heat of anger flush his face. You're lying! Maria would never! But her expression shifted, caught somewhere between guilt and defiance. It's true, she said quietly, her voice breaking. I did what I thought was right, to protect my family. What family? Edward's voice cracked. You mean my family? How could you? Just then, Bella reached for Maria's hand, her grip firm. You didn't know everything, Bella said, her tone a mixture of sympathy and urgency. There are bigger forces at play here. Edward, if we don't figure this out, we will lose everything. The lights flickered again, a warning that something terrible was coming. Just then, Jacob's voice broke through the noise. You think you understand? You know nothing. There are people hunting your family, and she, Maria, she's the key. And then a loud crash rattled the fabric of the room again. But this time, it was accompanied by a roar of voices outside. The sound of movements and chaos escalating. Edward turned to the window, a sickening realization dawning as he saw dark figures approaching, rough shadows climbing over the walls of the mansion. In that moment, with fear etching itself deep, with everything spiraling into chaos, Maria suddenly stepped away. I'll protect you, she said, her eyes wild, determination hardening her features. I have to confront them. Maria, wait! Edward shouted, panic rising like bile in his throat. But it was too late. She dashed toward the back entrance, ready to face whatever threat loomed outside. What if she's right? Jacob murmured, his voice now a guttural whisper. But still, the tremors in the house thudded like a heartbeat. Edward felt heavy. Betrayal crushed him. But beneath that weight flickered a spark of resolve. We have to go now. All of us. We need to face this together. And as they ran toward the door, the storm brewing outside echoed within. Darkness seeping into the mansion like an unwelcome guest. What had Maria truly been hiding? What lay beyond those walls? Everything felt like a race against time, a race to untangle the threads of this monumental betrayal before they were swallowed whole. The chaos in the room felt like an electric storm, crackling with tension and confusion. Edward's heart raced as he watched Maria dash toward the back entrance, determined to face whatever danger lurked outside. He wanted to scream for her to stop, but the words died in his throat, panic twisted in his gut. Why is she doing this? He thought, each rapid breath tearing through his chest. The guests, still caught in disbelief, shifted anxiously, their disdain for Maria transforming into raw fear. Stop her! Someone shouted, but it was too late. She was already out the door. Edward bolted after her, the cold air slamming into him like a wall. As he stepped outside, the scene unfurled before him in a surreal blur. Shadows moved like ghosts at the edge of the manicured lawn. Dark figures loomed, their identities concealed by the night. He pushed past the rustling trees, his pulse a frantic drumbeat. Maria, he shouted, his voice cracking. But all he heard in return was the rustling of leaves, a soft whisper of danger lurking close. His eyes darted back and forth, searching for her, the swirling anxiety threatening to choke him. Just then, the shadows swelled, a mass of bodies moving closer. Edward's adrenaline spiked as he felt the threat drawing near, and then explosions of shouts erupted from the shadows. Get down! Someone yelled, and suddenly chaos exploded in full force. Gunfire rang out, sharp and chilling, sending Edward sprawling to the ground. The world narrowed around him, his heart thundering in his ears. He scrambled for cover, adrenaline coursing through his veins. What was happening? Who were these people? In the chaos, a figure emerged from the darkness, Jacob, his pallor illuminated by erratic flashes of lightning. "Edward, we have to go!" Jacob shouted, his eyes wild with urgency. "They're after her." Just as Edward opened his mouth to respond, he spotted Maria standing at the edge of the commotion. Her hands were raised, firm, as if she were trying to calm the storm. "Maria, no!" he yelled, fear flooding his voice as he forced himself to his feet, ready to sprint towards her. "Get back!" But she didn't move. Instead, she remained defiantly anchored in place, eyes locked on the intruders. "Stop!" she shouted, and the world echoed her command, a strange power unfurling around her. Edward watched, frozen, as the shadows around Maria shifted uneasily. She took a cautious step forward. "I'll protect you. I have to confront them." Suddenly, a blinding light burst from her, illuminating the night like the dawn breaking through the darkness. Gasps erupted around him, both from the guests and the dark figures, their movements faltering in awe. "Maria, what are you?" Edward's voice trembled, realization clawing at his insides. And then, the impossible happened. The intruders recoiled, their fear palpable, and in that frenzied moment, he glimpsed something horrifying in Maria's eyes. They weren't simply filled with fear or determination. They radiated an ancient power, a strength that sent chills down his spine. "Stay back! You don't understand!" she shouted again, the very ground trembling beneath her words. A light pulse from her, a forgotten force awakening like a storm crashing to life. The strangers hesitated, their faces shifting from malice to confusion. But then one stepped forward, a smirk creeping across his lips. "You think you can wield that power against us? You don't know what you're dealing with, girl. Your family's legacy is about to be unveiled." Edward's world tilted sharply. "Legacy? What legacy?" His mind raced with 1,000 possibilities. "What do you mean?" But before anyone could answer, the earth shook violently and everything erupted in chaos. The very ground cleaved and split. A fissure appeared at Maria's feet, swallowing the ground and sending debris flying in every direction. Edward fell to his knees, instinctively reaching for her. Was she a shield, or was she the weapon? He could hear the gasps from behind him, the murmurs of the crowd descending into panic. As he struggled to comprehend, reality twisted, revealing an avalanche of secrets that threatened to bury him alive. A legacy darker than he imagined was about to surface, and Maria, the girl he thought he knew, held the key. A terrifying thought gnawed at him. Was she protecting him or sacrificing him? "Edward!" Jacob's voice sliced through the chaos. "We have to get out before it's too late." With that, the thunderous roar of the earth continued, the world shifting beneath him. Would they escape this unraveling nightmare? Or was this just the beginning of a far darker truth? The chaos engulfing them felt like a storm, swirling and violent, pulling Edward's heart in 100 directions. Maria stood her ground, defiance etched across her face. But all he wanted was to pull her back to safety. He could hear Jacob shouting, "Why is boom, rocks, bow?" "Ah, not a patent." urging them to escape the descending shadows. But the revelation hung in the air, raw and bleak. "Maria, please!" he yelled, scrambling forward, desperation clawing at him. But as he moved, the ground lurched. Before he could reach her, the earth split open wider, a jagged chasm gaping like a mouth ready to swallow them alive. "Run!" Jacob shouted, trying to pull him back. But Edward couldn't tear his gaze away from Maria. Then, in an explosive moment, her body was yanked backward into the dark abyss. Edward lunged forward, but before he could reach her, a surprising force propelled him back. Despair flooded through him as he watched her vanish, swallowed by the darkness. "No!" he screamed, pain tearing through his chest. In that flicker of time, everything shifted. Suddenly, from the depths, a flash of blinding light burst forth, a glow that illuminated every face in the crowd. Gasps echoed in unison, reverberating in the air like an unholy choir. Edward stumbled, momentarily blind, and then out she came, Maria, but she was different. Her form glowed, ethereal, hovering inches above the ground. Ethereal energy crackled around her, blindingly bright, transforming her into an image of power. "Edward!" Her voice resonated, echoing like a bell in his brain, both comforting and terrifying. "All this time, you thought you knew me," she said, her eyes shimmering with a light that seemed almost otherworldly. "I'm not just a caretaker's daughter. I'm part of something ancient." Fear gripped Edward. What are you talking about?" His voice quivered, eyes wide, watching the impossible unfold. "I was chosen," Maria declared, her features flickering in the light. "My family, we've protected a secret, a legacy rooted in power that your family has sought to control for generations. I never wanted you involved, but now," she hesitated, her expression shifting, "I need you to understand the truth before it's too late." Edward felt his heart drop. "You lied to me!" Anguish speared through him, deep and true. "I had to," she replied softly, her voice cracking, "to protect you. But they've come for us all." In that moment, the crowd rallied, murmurs sweeping like wildfire. Shock and disbelief twisted across their faces. Edward was lost in a fog of confusion. The man claiming to be their father stood immobilized, shock paralyzing him as the truth sliced through the air like glass. Maria was something more. Their world, once divided by class and privilege, was now entangled in something tangled and dangerous. Edward felt hollow, as if the ground beneath him had been pulled away. He was searching for answers when the dark figures moved closer, seemingly drawn by her light. Then, just as he began to grasp the weight of her words, Maria's voice raised, powerful and commanding. "No more secrets. It ends now." And as if in response, a dark figure reemerged from the shadows, one Edward thought he had left behind. It was his father, but there was something different about him. His eyes glinted with malice, matching the tension brewing in the air. "The truth is much darker than you know, Maria," he said, the words dripping with venom, eyes locking onto Edward. "You were never supposed to survive." Rage, confusion, and betrayal intermingled within Edward. Everything he knew was crumbling, each cherished connection spiraling into uncertainty. What was the truth? And who, If anyone, could he trust now? Edward. Maria hovered above the ground, her voice painting the air with an otherworldly resonance. It was surreal, almost too stark to believe. The dark intruders shifted uneasily, eyes darting like cornered animals, their bravado slipping under the weight of her glow. As she faced the approaching shadows, the truth hung palpably. Something deeper than they all could fathom. But just then, Edward's father, eyes glinting with something more sinister, stepped forward. "You really don't understand, do you?" His tone was chilling like ice cracking. "This isn't just about Maria. It's about the power. Our power. Everything we've built, everything you think you know, is a lie." Panic crashed into Edward again, fresh and raw. "What do you mean?" He felt the blood drain from his face. The crowd behind him was held in a spell, gasping and whispering, caught in the storm of secrets swirling around them. "Your mother," his father started, and the weight of that word pierced through the air. "She was bound to a pact. Our family's legacy isn't just wealth, it's blood magic. And Maria, she's the key." A collective gasp swept through the guests. Edward felt the world shatter around him, each fragment slicing deeper. "Blood magic?" he spat, disbelief bubbling to the surface. "What are you talking about?" But before his father could respond, the dark figure that had caught Edward's attention the moment he slipped through the door took a step forward, revealing a face that made Edward's heart stop. It wasn't just any stranger. No, it was a reflection of himself, a parallel existence of every desire to escape this exact moment. "Meet your brother, Edward," his father said, almost gloating. "Tristan, born a twin brother to you. He's the one who can join the two worlds, tied to both magic and power." Everything exploded, and the world spun. Edward's heart pounded against his ribs, blood rushing loudly in his ears. "You're lying!" he shouted, rage igniting. "How could you?" Tristan's voice cut through the chaos, steady and chilling. "You think you can escape this, brother? You can't outrun your bloodline." Confusion twisted into fury. Edward could feel the crowd's tension rise. Whispers bounced off the walls, dragging them all into a vortex of disbelief. Eyes widened, brows furrowed. No one knew who to believe anymore. Clarity struck hard. "This doesn't make sense," he yelled, grappling for control. "You were never there, Dad. You abandoned us both." Maria, lost in her ethereal state, looked helplessly between the two men who shared blood, yet stood worlds apart. "What does this mean for us?" she whispered, fear creeping into her voice. "Everything," Edward's father replied, the shadow of a smile curling on his lips. "With the twins reunited, everything we've desired can be ours once again. Power beyond imagination." Then, as if the universe itself responded to the revelation, the ground quaked once more, a violent rumble shaking them to their cores. A gust of wind swept through, snatching Maria's glow and thrusting it back into darkness. She fell, arms flailing, a piercing scream echoing into nothingness. Edward lunged for her, feet pounding against the tremors that threatened to topple them all. "No!" he shouted, reaching out. Panic etched across his features. But in a terrifying twist, as his fingers brushed against hers, Everything shifted. In that moment, the lights flickered, then went dark, plunging them into shadowy chaos. And within that confusion, a deafening silence fell, revealing the faintest heartbeat. Edward's eyes widened, mind racing as the truth began to twist in his thoughts, something darker lurking beneath it all. Was the true enemy already among them? There it was, the beginning of the unraveling, the stitch breaking loose. As the ground shifted and shadows closed in, they were all left suspended between worlds, the weight of their tangled legacies crashing into one another. Uncertainty draped thickly like a fog. What was to come? What lay hidden in the darkness? As the unveiled truth crashed over them, the world felt like it was breaking. Edward could hardly breathe. The piercing glow of Maria faded, her power dimming in the shadow of his father's cold revelations. Instinctively, he felt the weight of betrayal and anger boil inside him. He couldn't make sense of the tangled web they were caught in, every emotion fighting for attention. "Maria, please, you have to tell me what you mean," he pleaded, his eyes locked on her, watching as her spirit flickered like a candle in the wind. But before she could respond, the ground shook violently again, a deep rumble vibrating through the air. Edward stumbled, desperately clutching onto the wall for support, as panic surged through the guests. Shouts mingled with gasps, chaos erupting once more. "Get inside, now!" someone screamed, fear taking hold of the crowd. In that instant, shadows surged forward from the woods, figures spilling into the chaos, their faces obscured by darkness. Edward felt something shift inside him, a sudden urge to shield Maria, to gather her close against the impending storm. But then, something unfathomable happened. Out of the throng, a figure emerged, moving with purpose. It was an older woman, face weathered, but strikingly familiar. She stepped forward with an air of authority, eyes piercing through the confusion. Edward's breath caught as recognition swept over him like a tidal wave. "Megan," he whispered, disbelief flooding his senses. The woman who had been long gone, his mother's sister, had vanished years ago without explanation. She now stood as a living ghost from his childhood, taking center stage at the most chaotic moment of his life. "Mother is alive," she stated flatly, her voice slicing through the chaos like a knife. "And Maria, you need to know." The intensity of her gaze locked with Edward's, and an icy chill went down his spine. "And what are you talking about?" Edward felt the ground drop beneath him. The world spun again. How can this be? Megan stepped even closer, her presence drawing every eye toward her. The murmurs faded, tension thick and nearly suffocating. "The burden of our family's power doesn't end with secrets. It's about what you have inside." She turned to Maria, who was now trembling, the remnants of light flickering around her. "You are not the only one who was chosen." The crowd gasped, a collective shudder rippling through people, confusion morphing into horror. "Not just blood magic," Megan continued, her intensity escalating. "This is about the curse, the lineage that ties us together. There is a reason why you two are drawn to each other. You share blood that binds the very fabric of our legacy." Edward felt the air thicken. What did she mean? How deeply were they intertwined? Jessica, one of the onlookers, murmured, "What are you saying?" Her voice quivered, fear dancing on the edge of incredulity. Then, the unexpected hit. An agonizing scream pierced the air. It was core-shaking, harsh enough to fracture whatever illusion of stability lingered. Edward turned, heart racing, to find his father staggering back. His face was a mask of terror and pain. "I'm sorry. I didn't want this." He clutched his chest, eyes wide with a mix of fury and regret, collapsing to the ground. What is happening?" Edward felt a chaotic mix of horror and confusion. The room spun wildly around him as whispers of the guests erupted into frantic noise. Before he could process it, another shriek cut through the air. Not just a sound, but a realization. Edward's world tilted again. "It's too late," Megan said softly, stepping forward. A strange urgency glassing her expression. The truth, once unearthed, can't be buried again. In that pivotal moment, a memory washed over Edward, haunting and unmistakable. He remembered whispered secrets, hushed tones beneath the candlelight. Confronted by possibility, he grasped the implications. Who was truly in control here? What had they unleashed within themselves amid all this turmoil? Shadows gathered closer, the flickering lights above revealing faces marked with fear and desperation. "Maria," he murmured, realizing the depth of the chaos spiraling around them. "What does this mean for us?" As uncertainty enveloped them, everything hung in the balance. Would the truth break them, or could it forge a new path? The room thickened with unsaid words, the air heavy with what awaited to come. There it was, the anchor of destiny shifting, revealing doubts. And Edward, caught in the eye of the storm, was left only with questions and the unraveling of all he thought he knew. Edward felt the air thicken with a weight that made it hard to breathe. His heart raced, pounding in his chest like a war drum. Megan's words echoed through the chaotic scene, and he pressed a hand to his forehead, trying to clear the confusion swirling inside. Maria hovered before him, illuminated but trembling. "What do you mean I'm tied to this?" he whispered, dread creeping through him. The shadows danced, drawing closer. The crowd behind him shrunk away, eyes wide in disbelief. But it was the room's sudden stillness that made the sweat form on Edward's brow. Then, before he could process it, a flash of blue lightning illuminated the darkness, and everything changed. In a heartbeat, the ground cracked wide open beneath them, sending tremors, like a heartbeat, across the floor. Edward stumbled backward, terror clawing at his throat. The sound of rushing air filled his ears. He felt the pull of the abyss that seemed to stretch infinitely below. But among all the chaos, someone burst forth from the gaping chasm. A form shot upward, solid and fierce, surging like a powerful wave crashing against the shore. It was his mother. "No!" Edward gasped, eyes wide in shock. How was this even possible? He had spent years mourning her, buried under layers of grief. "Mom!" She hovered above them, eyes fierce, yet caught in pain. Her presence drenched the room in a glittering aura, a shining beacon, despite the darkness closing in. "Edward!" she called out. "You have to stop them now! You don't realize the danger!" His breath hitched. "But you, how are you here?" "Later," she urged, the urgency in her voice slicing through his clouded mind. "You need to listen. Maria is more important than you know. She's connected to everything. Your life, your family, this power." The crowd gasped, fear flooding into whispers and murmurings of uncertainty and denial. The power shifted fearfully, shadows flitting in and out as the chaos drew nearer. "Mom, please!" Edward shouted, desperation wrapping around his words. "What do you mean?" Megan stepped forward, her voice rising. "This isn't just about family ties. It's about a curse, one that binds us all. Mother was meant to guide you to the truth." Then, like a curtain being pulled back, the air shifted. Edward's heart raced as the room began to shake even more violently. The lights flickered wildly, illuminating each shocked face, each wide-eyed secret laid bare. From the chaos, the dark figures hesitated, their bravado faltering. "No!" one called out, the voice rising in rising panic. "You shouldn't have done this!" And in that moment, Edward's heart nearly stopped. An unseen force crackled, pulsing through the room, igniting every shadow with a burning light. Suddenly, everything erupted into chaos. The enormous lamp overhead flickered and fell, shattering against the floor, splintering like glass exploding in slow motion. It was both beautiful and terrifying. Edward lunged to protect Maria, and they fell together to the ground, surrounded by shards that gleamed like stars lost in the darkness. But when he looked up, a new figure had stepped forth, a woman cloaked in shadows, fiercely regal and commanding. She raised a hand, silencing the noise, a presence that demanded attention. "I am Eleanor," she declared, "the matriarch of our legacy, the puppet master behind every hidden secret." Edward's heart plummeted. He recognized her from family portraits. His ancestor, the woman whose choices had echoed through generations. But it wasn't just her presence. It was the revelation. "I never wanted any of this to come out. Yet you've unleashed the truth. Your blood ties you not only to power, but a dark destiny," she intoned, fixing Edward with a burning gaze. The reality crashed down like thunder. Was it a curse or a blessing? Did this mean they were all part of a cycle they could never escape? The room held its breath, collective hearts pounding in real fear. Edward realized in horror what this meant for them all. "No!" he shouted, scrambling to get to his feet. "We can't let you control us." But Eleanor simply smiled, a chilling expression that made chills run down his spine. "You'll understand soon enough." Then, without warning, she vanished into thin air, leaving behind only the echo of chaos. A rising fear filled the room, questions piling on top of one another. And in that moment of darkness, the truth unraveled like a broken thread, ready to snap entirely. What did it all mean? How much more had been hidden? As silence filled the heavy air once more, Edward's thoughts ran wild. This was only the beginning. The pieces were beginning to connect, but in unforeseen ways, and the storm presaged chaos rather than truth. What lay ahead? Only the shadows knew. The air felt electric, thick with tension and uncertainty as chaos swirled around them. Edward's mind raced, his heart thundering like a drum. Maria hovered in that strange light. Her expression, a mix of fear and raw power. "I never wanted this," she whispered, voice trembling. "Mom, we need answers," Edward shouted, desperation pouring from him. The ground trembled beneath them again, reminding everyone of the chaos outside. Shadows moving closer like an impending storm. Megan stepped up, her voice cutting through the confusion like a blade. "Listen to her, Edward. The truth is both a blessing and a curse. You need to find a way to control it, or it will destroy you." "Control what?" he cried, panic tightening his chest. "What do we even have left?" Before anyone could respond, the dark figure surged forward, eyes glinting like predator. Quick as lightning, Edward grasped Maria's hand, pulling her close as they stood together against the advancing shadows. He could feel the warmth radiating from her, grounding him, pushing the fear back. "Together," he urged, squeezing her hand tighter. "We can face this, whatever it is." "Don't let them pull you into darkness," Megan warned, but her voice was drowned out by the roaring chaos. Suddenly, their father broke through the horde, eyes wild with fury. "You think you can stop this?" he yelled, desperation lacing his words. "You're too late, Edward." With the flick of his wrist, the air crackled, and shadows twisted into monstrous shapes. Gasps echoed in the crowd as they realized the threat was very real. "Mom!" Edward shouted, fear piercing through him again. "What do we do?" "Channel it!" Her voice boomed, the confidence igniting a spark deep within him. "You have to be stronger than the fear." The world around them shifted, the shadows flickering like dying embers. Edward's heart raced as he focused all his energy on Maria, drawing in the warmth they shared, letting it fill him. Together they rose, light spilling from their beings, a radiant barrier forming as they stood united. The darkness recoiled, shadows wavering. The surrounding crowd gasped, eyes wide with awe and fear. "That's it! You can do this!" Megan urged, her voice rising above the chaos. As shadows twisted and shrieked, Edward felt an overwhelming tide of emotions crashing over him. Anger, sorrow, and hope. "You're not taking her," he roared, pushing against the dark mass, fueling their light. "Together!" Maria echoed, her voice fierce as the glow enveloped them both. The darkness hissed, swirling like a storm, but the light grew brighter. And then, silence. The shadows thinned, dissipating like mist in the morning sun. Edward breathed a sigh of relief, staring into the glowing light that pulsed softly. They had done it, but there was no time to celebrate. Edward turned, looking at his father, who was now standing on the edge, mouth agape, cloaked in uncertainty. The truth lay bare, wrapped in the remnants of fear that had once chained them all. As the light faded, Maria stumbled back into Edward's arms, her face pale but determined. "Is it over?" she asked, voice shaky. "For now," Megan replied, her tone softer, a hint of warmth, breaking through the fierce tension. "But shadows linger. They'll come again. We must prepare." Edward nodded, guilt mixing with hope. They were tied together, all of them. The past would not let go easily. As they stood together, a fragile bond forged through fear and uncertainty. Edward felt a flicker of hope bloom within him. "We'll fight," he said, determination rising like a phoenix. "Together!" In the distance, the storm clouds began to clear, revealing streaks of light. But the world remained uncertain, shadows lurking at the edges. The journey was just beginning. And now it's your turn to step forward with us in this journey. You must subscribe now so you don't miss any upcoming exclusive stories that will unfold. Each story will bring more twists, more revelations. Smash that like button right now to feed the algorithm and let the magic spread. Flood the comment section with your reactions and theories about this incredible finale. Your voice matters. Don't wait 1 second longer to share this video with at least 5 friends who need to know how this ends. Show your support for the channel and be part of this growing community. Your engagement makes a world of difference.